Welcome back to the channel. My name is Adam. Today we're going to be talking about In God We Trust. We're going to talk about the dollar, we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve, and we're going to talk about the problem with the Federal Reserve System. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Adam, and today what I want to do is I want to give a biblical insight into the judiciary issues going on within our federal government, including a brief overview of the Federal Reserve System, the U.S. Treasury, and the U.S. dollar. As we know, if you're an American citizen, you've noticed that since 2003, the price of gas has gone from around an average of $1.05 a gallon to, at least where I'm living, a little over $3. Now it's gone upwards to $4 a gallon. The price of lumber has gone up. The price of groceries have skyrocketed. Inflation has gone way up. So, as an American citizen, when I look at these issues and I think about the US dollar, in the bottom it says, "In God we trust." Do we really? It's kind of a rhetorical question. Do we really trust God? Well, I do. I trust in God, but I don't know if I trust the dollar. And I don't think, if you look at geopolitical issues and you look at the economic issues going on around the world, I don't necessarily think that the US dollar is trusted anymore either. Recently, there was a meeting going on within several governments and have decided to turn away from using the US dollar as their reflective currency. They don't want to trade for US dollars. They would rather trade with a more stable currency. And why is that? Well, let's rewind all the way back to 1970. And in 1970, I think it was 1990 or 1971, when the US government decided to decouple from the gold standard. What was the gold standard? The gold standard was when we used gold to set as an international trading item for keeping fixed prices and fixed prices for currency exchange. Why was that? Okay. Another review of going back in time. After World War I and then World War II, there was a lot of fluctuation with economies. Governments worldwide had to recover from these world wars. So the US government decided to use the actual gold as a currency so that other governments, other economies could use it as a fixed way of trading money. And that was useful to help stabilize the world economy. So that's what we're calling it when we call it the gold standard, or the that we used to have the gold standard of income or the gold standard of money. That is where we get that idea from. Okay. However, as other governments and their economies started to reestablish themselves, the US government also had a problem with keeping up with the price of gold, and critiques of the using gold as the stabilization item for currency would cite that you can have fluctuations in the price and the value of gold, and in trying to hold the value fixed, it ultimately has a cascade effect on inflation. So when President Nixon was in office, I can't remember who was the treasurer at that time, right off the top of my head, but essentially they ended up having a meeting and deciding to ditch gold at that point in time. Now, what did that ultimately pave the way for? What did that open things up for? Well, there was a couple of issues that arose within the establishment of the Federal Reserve banking system. I'm not going to do a full-on explanation of the Federal Reserve. Anybody can Google that, and you can read, what is the Federal Reserve Bank? Is it truly independent? It's a nonprofit bank. I mean, you can read all of it, what it is. There's a collection of governors that are essentially appointed by senators. And yeah. So it's this really complex economic system that, Jesus, neighbor dogs are barking like crazy over there. There's this really complex system in place. And yet there's major problems that are going on within the Federal Reserve System that have been exposed over the last 100 and however many years it's been since it was implemented. I think it was 1913 when it was implemented. So just as with any government system or government influenced system, there's going to be problems with it. And I'm going to cite a few of them. So I'm going to share my screen here in a little bit, and I'm going to show you some articles that I read in studying up on this issue. But the primary problem is that presidents have, in any kind of elected official, every time we're electing a president, every 4 years, we have a new president in our society. Now, sometimes of course they can have, there's a term limit, 2 terms. So you can have a president elected twice. Most of the time it's usually elected consecutively. In this upcoming election, there might be a possibility that Trump gets reelected. So it's very rare that you see that. I don't know if there was another instance of that ever happening. But what you notice is with every president, there's different priorities when it comes to their opinions on the economy. And every time that we switch presidents, it causes differentiation in the way that the Federal Reserve is used. If you want to think about the Federal Reserve as just kind of like a supposedly neutral party that is investing monies, treasury bonds, and all these other things, and then is using the excess funds that it raises during that time period and then adds it to the US Treasury, that in and of itself isn't the problem. The Federal Reserve isn't the problem. Unlike what Ron Paul thinks we should do, is just scrap the Federal Reserve and go back to using gold and whatever I know he wrote a book on this, which elucidated a lot of issues that were going on with corruption within the Federal Reserve and the government and the handling of it and all that. Look, I understand his perspective on all that, and I agree that there's problems with navigating these issues. But to just scrap the Federal Reserve is not a good idea. The Federal Reserve, it prints our currency, and it uses this really wonky system of internal exchange to guarantee as a backer for other major banks. So in order to try to avoid another major Great Depression, they try to adjust the amount of money that's available to creditors and to bank lenders, and they will act as like almost like an insurer for banks. But there's a problem with this, and what I've been asking God to show me is to talk about this from a biblical perspective. I think we need to rewind the clock a little bit and just talk about how money is supposed to be used. All right. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So here are 3 scriptures that we need to pay attention to. And in Romans 13:8, it says, "Let no debt remain outstanding except the continued debt to love one another, for whoever loves also has fulfilled the law." Let no debt remain outstanding. Well, we're in debt. Every year, our government spends like what, in excess of $9 trillion? $9 trillion. Way back when our country was first founded, when after we established our article as a independent nation, there was a period of time in which the leaders, the early leaders, realized that we didn't have a strong central government. We didn't have the ability to tax people really well. We didn't have any way to enforce our laws. We didn't have any way to fund an army. We didn't have any way to really truly make our country grow without having a central government. And that is why, of course, we pay taxes. It's a way to, I mean, you can kind of look at it as a negative way. It's kind of a way to control people, a lot of people, is through taxation and through law enforcement. Now, of course, we hope that they use that power justly, and that they tax fairly, and that they make decisions on what to do, use that tax money for honestly. As we all know, that the bigger the government gets, the less oversight is available, the more money is being spent, and the less honest this gets. Now, what does the scripture say? Here's what it says. Better the little that the righteous have than the wealth of many wicked. For the power of the wicked will be broken, but the Lord upholds righteousness. And then Proverbs says, dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. Is our government, should they be the ones in charge of all of these government, all these programs, these bailouts, like the early 2000 airline crisis, the GM, the car company crashes, the bank crisis in 2008, I mean, we could go over and over again. And how about wars? Let's look at 1970s. It just so happened to happen, or it just so happened to happen. A lot of coincidences happened, such as when Nixon asked his treasurer to boost the economy through using the Federal Reserve. It just so happened to be an election year, when they tried to stimulate the economy. Sound familiar? Sounds kind of dishonest, doesn't it? So why does a president have that type of influence? Why do they have that much power? Should they? Are the people that we are electing, is the system in place enough that we can have gradual growth instead of having all these major spikes and valleys? Isn't the point of having a government system to provide a stability? To me, that's what I think. Now, the libertarians think that we need to decentralize our government and to remove as many government programs as we can possible so that we limit the power of the federal government. Now, I agree with a lot of what they're saying and their approach to this. I don't agree with all of it, but I agree with this idea that we need to elect a president who is going to have a massive impact on the size of the government and reduce it back down to a reasonable size, and to empower states to regulate their own citizens instead of it being the federal government. And this is my perspective on this, and this is what God has shown me. You know, I was thinking about this a couple of years ago, and I was asking God about what is it that we need to do to create a more stable economy, a more stable government system, and a more stable reserve spending policy. And what he showed me, what he geared me to, is he just said to me that each state is sovereign. Each state within the United States is an independent state, and it each should be treated as a sovereign nation in and of itself. Now, collectively, of course, we are the United States, but each economy has its own sovereignty. So it's going to take the people to understand that the state that they live within should be the state that governs the economy within it, and not the federal government. And so I asked him to kind of show me, okay, what do you mean by that? And that's when I started understanding more about the libertarian perspective and limiting the powers of the federal government. What I've noticed is that the Federal Reserve has little to no accountability. I'm sorry, the politicians upstairs have little to no long-term accountability for the fiscal decisions that they make and the impact they have on the Federal Reserve. They're in for 4 years and they're out. I mean, they might be in for 8 years, but in the grand scheme of the entirety of our nation, that's a very small blip. So we have to be wary of these politicians who preach about the economy and what they're going to do to fix it, when in reality, the economy should be growing little by little over time. There should be no massive changes. Any politician that comes in or tries to get your vote by saying that they're going to make America great again just by instituting a couple financial policies, it's a fictitious statement, because ultimately the people are the ones that should be making the economy grow and recede. We're the ones that choose to trade for goods. We're the ones that should be the growing the economy. You have to empower your people to be able to make decisions for themselves. It's not a job of a president. I talked about this in my episode, who we should elect president. It's not the job of the president to determine what you do with your money. You're the one, and this is where you see even like the Rich Men North of Richmond song from Oliver and Anthony Music. He's right. Why are politicians having so much of an impact on our day-to-day spending and our day-to-day dollar? They're devaluing our dollar. Why? Because, well, there's several different reasons. Number one, overspending. How does a politician get elected? Like, especially a left-wing, far left-wing Democrat. Well, they promise more money to the people. Oh, we're just going to increase. We're going to create jobs. Oh, that means what? They're going to grow more government programs and offer jobs through government programs or government grants. Where's that money come from? It comes from the Federal Reserve. How do they get that money? Well, they print more money. How do we afford these wars? Like, just so happened to happen in the 1970s when we decoupled from the golden standard. There was no more accountability in place for what the Federal Reserve could do. And so the Federal Reserve is just a pawn. Because at that point in time, the president was like, oh, well, let's just spend more money. Hey, print me more money. I need some more money because give me a loan. I need to go send hundreds of thousands of troops overseas into Vietnam. Let's upscale the war. And who profited from those wars? Kellogg's Branded Root. The people feeding bullets, bread. Those are the people that profited off of the wars, not the American people. This is how you get inflation. By presidents that we're electing every 4 years that make radically terrible decisions on what we're doing with not only our greatest asset, which is each citizen, but also our financial assets, what we're doing with the dollar. Do you trust the dollar? It says in the bottom, in God we trust, but are we really trusting God? Are these politicians that we are electing, are they godly men that are making sound financial decisions? Not really. When was the last time we elected a president that you really trusted with the economy? I know that Trump had a positive impact. He sounds a whole heck of a lot of like a blowhard and this guy that's just crazy on Twitter. But generally speaking, his policies were fairly moderate, right. He didn't make any grand major changes on the economy. He just came in and with a whole big puff of smoke. But then when he got in and started actually doing the work, he was actually decent and the economy stabilized. So we can't keep having these politicians that we elect having such a radical difference in how they want to spend the American dollar. There has to be something that we put in place. We need to have laws that are written up that limit the power of the presidency, that limit the power of government spending, and have more accountability for what we do with our money. We can't keep having these endless wars, or like what's going on with the Ukraine and a proxy war with Russia. We can't keep having this where we're just spending billions and billions and billions of dollars for what? To kill other people? That's what's happening. We should be in a diplomatic stance right now. And we should be recovering our hard fought freedoms from World War II. It takes 3 generations to heal from every war. 3 generations. It's what we know psychologically, that it can take up to 3 generations to heal after one war. Where does that put us? We're in a proxy war right now. So it's what, 2023. So it's going to take us another now 3 generations in order for us as our economy and for our mental and spiritual well-being to recover. 3 generations. That's what it says. And I get that from a book called What It's Like to Go to War. That's the name of the book that I'm referencing. It's an amazing book. I love the read. But anywho, I'm going to back some of this stuff up with talking about the Federal Reserve. Let's go ahead and share the screen because I'm talking a lot, but let's jump in here. Oh, let's move this over here so I can see what I'm clicking on. Okay, here we go. This is from American Institute for Economic Research, written by Thomas Hogan in June of 2021. And what you can read it on your own if you would like, but here's what he says. One problem with the central banks is that the government simply does not have enough information or knowledge necessary to run such a complex economy. The Fed uses aggregate statistics. And then here we go down here before a second problem. A second well-known problem is that the government officials face political incentives. The authors provide many examples of the Fed decisions driven by political motives instead of sound economics. These include, this is what I was talking about, poor economic policy decisions such as Fed Chair Arthur Burns was his name, capitulation to President Nixon's request to boost the economy in an election year, repeated accommodation of federal government debt and caving to special interests and powerful banks. So what does he suggest? Here's what he suggests. Here's what he says. There are simple ways to improve upon discretionary and often disastrous decisions of central bankers. First, he says, discretionary policy should be consistent and predictable so that consumers and businesses can plan for the future. Second, monetary policy decisions should be based on simple rules that are well known but also robust, meaning they can be effective without requiring discretionary actions even when things go wrong. It's always our temptation, isn't it? It's always our temptation when we see an unemployment rate go up, or we see the inflation rate go up, or we see the stock market crashing, or we see or hear that there is a car company that's going under. And the people cry, oh, save us, Jesus president, save us from this disastrous bankruptcy we're going through. Oh, wait a minute. That flies in the face of Adam Smith when he talks about the free hand of the economy. Everybody who's ever been to college, who's taken any kind of business class, that's one of the first things they teach you in accounting, and the economy, is that there's this free hand of the economy. The free hand of the economy happens when people make decisions for themselves. So, for example, if a car company is creating a shitty product and nobody wants to buy it because it sucks, and there's a better product that they like that they want to buy, like a Toyota that lasts longer, that has better reputation, that has better quality, or if they want a Tesla because they want an electric vehicle and they don't want to buy these huge trucks anymore from Chevrolet or wherever else. Well, wait a minute. Wouldn't it be a good idea to allow that company, which made shitty decisions on its own marketing and its own product development and its own sales and performance and manufacturing, wouldn't it be better in the long run to allow the free hand of the economy to decide what car companies should be in business? But no, the government and the president, they don't want a big business to go under during their presidency because that'll make them look bad. Car companies will bounce back if they have to live with their own consequences. Otherwise, we call, what is that called? It's called a shell or a ghost company. The government comes in and they get this money from the Federal Reserve, and then they just dump money into this broken company to try to alleviate people's job loss. But you know what? If you're working for a company that sucks, get a better job, get a more consistent job, go to a different place that's going to have a more stable marketing and product development. It's these short-term, narrow-minded decisions that ruin this concept of the free hand of the economy. There's no accountability for the government's decisions in those terms, because as soon as the president's out of office, it's the people who have to suffer ultimately. Because we're the ones that have to pay for these $5 carts of eggs now and the $6 gallons of milk. They don't have to worry about it. Most presidents, name one president that you've ever heard of that went bankrupt himself now after presidency. Name one politician that you know of who's living homeless. It's not the elite that are suffering from their own decisions that they make when they're in office. It's you, the average person, that's just like Oliver and Anthony was talking about, and Oliver Anthony music. It's us. It's the people like you and me who pour our lives out, sometimes 12, 16-hour workdays. When I was overseas in the military, it's funny because you just do the calculations. When we were activated overseas, we were in a hazard duty zone. You get paid a little bit more for that, but we were literally on call for 24/7. I mean, I was averaging probably 4 to 5 hours of sleep at night if I was lucky, but there was many days that you would go without sleep, and you were on duty that entire time. You didn't get paid any more or any less, depending on the number of hours you worked. You were the government's pawn, and you did what they said, and you went where you were told to go, and you did your job. You didn't get paid very well, because if you just did the per hour and you divided it out however many hours that we were on duty, we probably gotten paid 5 times the amount. There was no overtime. There was no holiday pay. I was out in the middle of the desert on my birthday. I was out on duty on Christmas. I didn't get paid overtime for that. And that's what I'm saying. These politicians that are making these terrible decisions, like this war on terror, It costs the American public, you, the taxpayer, you, the person going in to work at these dead-end jobs or going to work at Burger King for minimum wage and then scraping to try to get by every day. You're the one sees that the dollar, the one that says in God we trust, we're trusting less in God now than we were before. Why is that? Because we put too much trust in the government and we've allowed the government to become too big. So if you think about the founding fathers knew that we needed a stronger central government, but they didn't have so much data and information at the time to be able to create a limit on that government. They knew, and you can read about it in some books that review the founding fathers' opinions on the policies that they wanted to put in place. They knew that it was not a perfect constitution. They knew that there was going to have to be amendments. They knew that these things would have to be reviewed by future, reviewed in the future, right? Just like civil rights. They deferred that decision of slavery because we were still a slave society, slave-based economy. During the War of Independence. And that's why they deferred it until later, because they realized that they couldn't fix everything going on all at once. And so they left it up to future generations to decide how big the federal government would get, how much influence it would have. And that's the allure of having a strong central, a large central government, is that you have this false illusion of safety and comfort. That's all it is. Because if you stop paying taxes, is if we all stopped, I'm not recommending this, by the way, but if everybody just stopped paying their taxes, every single citizen across the nation, and they refuse to pay sales tax, real estate tax, any tax at all, if everybody in the entire country just decided, you know what, nope, we're going on strike, we're not paying a single dime in tax at all, are they going to put us all in prison? And this is what I'm saying. The government shakes in their boots when they have a large number of people that refuse to go by what they want to do. And it takes a large number of people to come into agreement together to make to force the government to have to change its nature. So again, I'm not encouraging mass riots or refusals to pay taxes or any of that. Like, I don't think that would be a good move, but I'm just saying, if you look at that, that's the power of the people actually have, and the government knows it. And that's why we have these laws. That's why we have the IRS. That's why we have a freestanding military. That's why we have state police, to enforce the laws that the federal government comes up with. But again, if the entire nation decided to put a stopgap in that and say, you know what, we're not paying taxes anymore, what could the government do? They couldn't. They don't have enough room in prisons to put everybody in. They would be forced to capitulate. So we don't have to go to that extent, but we could if we had to. And that's why I'm saying, we, the people, are the ones with the power. We are the ones that decide with our vote. And so we, the people, are the ones to blame, because we haven't elected the right people. We haven't, and consistently, we haven't elected the right people. Now, of course, that calls each one of us individually to be better judges of character. Yeah, I think was it my episode yesterday that talked about the Pearly Things, and Pearl's idea about this concept that she's reviewed women's votes all the way back to the time that women's suffrage, And in each and every election, a female's tendency is to want to encourage more welfare state, more of a social services, more tax the wealthy and pass it on to everybody else. That's kind of a natural inclination for a woman, is to want to flatten the curve. Whereas generally speaking, males are more ruthless. We see it differently. We see it as, well, if you don't have the money, you don't spend it. If you don't have the money, you're not going on a vacation. Generally speaking, that's how men operate. And that's how things should be. But what you see now is a lot of presidents that will pander to the female vote, promising more social welfare and social services and more programs and more grants and free education and free healthcare and all these free. You know, the other thing that you learn in college, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch, because that money's got to come from somewhere. And that is the fantasy, where when I was talking about the idea of headship in the family, a wife can say, oh, I want to go on vacation. I want to go to the beach. I want to go here. I want to go there. And the guy is looking at the account and is like, yeah, we got like $500 in our savings and we got a whole bunch of bills to pay. And I'm already working overtime. Yeah, sorry, honey, we can't go on vacation this year. Of course, he has to be look like the bad guy. And each president that we elect doesn't want to have to be the bad guy. Of course, it makes him look better, just like Nixon. Oh, well, let's just override the Federal Reserve and just pump more money into the economy. That'll make me look better. Wouldn't that be great? And it's the same thing in what I struggled in my relationship. It was like, oh, well, let me just take out another credit card. I'll pay for our vacation and then I'll defer that and work harder throughout the week. And at one point I was working 2 jobs and going to school full time. Nothing was ever enough for her. Nothing. No matter how much money I gave, it was like pouring it into a black hole and that's the same way with our proclivity as a nation. It's just throw more money at it. Let's just print more money. Let's put that on credit. Let's put this war on credit. Let's put this bailout on credit. Let's put this healthcare initiative like Obama. Let's put that on credit. Let's put everything on credit and hope that the future generations will work hard enough to pay off this debt. Does that sound like a good thing? I don't think so. You know, as a veteran, as a 100% service connect disabled veteran, I depend on that money coming in through the government every month to pay my child support and to pay my daily bills. So of course I would be impacted by a reduction of the government and its ability to pay what they've promised for disabled veterans. Of course. And I've done a lot of things to try to raise money and be independent from that. And I've prayed to God that he would allow me to create. I have a couple different business plans, but you know, I've refused to live off of this disability income. I know that I shouldn't be only living off of one source of income. That's nobody in this economy can truly live off of one income anymore. Nobody can. And so, you know, God gave me some business plans, and I've been taking business plans, business development through a program called Warrior Rising, which is a entrepreneurship development program for disabled veterans. So I've been doing that, and I've developed a trademark for a dog company. I've developed a couple of different things and ideas for what I want to create. One of them is a t-shirt company that I want to offer for to actually manufacture them in prisons and forward profits, a percentage of those profits to the prisoners, so that they can not only learn the trade skill, but that they can come out of prison with a nest egg so that they have something that they can look forward to. Because often you see prisoners come out of jail, they got no jobs, no perspectives. They go right back to selling drugs or killing or stealing. So and if you look at it again, we have like what, almost 2 million people in jail right now. Who pays for that? The government. What if that happens if they don't have enough money? Well, they print it. They print more money. So our job should be to be teaching people to fish for themselves. Instead of the government bailing you out whenever your job is in question, how about you diversify your portfolio, start your own business, have a side hustle or 2 or 3. That's the people that are succeeding in this economy, are the people who have diversified their income sources. They've got YouTube channels, they've got product lines, they got merch lines, they've got sponsors, they've got this and that. And that's why I started this channel, because to me, this is my follow through on what God put on my heart, that I need to have multiple areas that will draw income, so that I'm not so dependent on one. Because what happens if the government doesn't do their government buyout? Well, then I won't get a paycheck. And if that doesn't happen, then I can't pay child support, and I can't pay my bills. I can't buy food. So yeah, I mean, it's a realistic fear, because I depend on that, and I don't want to have to be dependent on the government. That's my biggest fear, is being dependent on the federal government. We shouldn't, as citizens, we shouldn't be dependent. Even if you're dependent on Social Security, like the idea, again, the biblical scripture is that money should be earned a little at a time, saved a little bit at a time, and it'll grow a little bit at a time. And we have to have the diligence and the discipline to allow that money to grow through different investments, and having a different ways of letting that money grow, and withhold the impulsivity to spend that all, which is what I struggled with in that marriage. I had 5 kids, so of course that money was being spent, but at the same time, like, I begged for us to be on a budget. And when you're with somebody that has a black hole in their heart, and I was codependent, so I was just, at the time, I was just funneling all that money in, thinking that if I just made more money, that it would solve our problems as a family. And it was never enough. So I'm admitting to you that I was part of the problem in my own personal life financially. That's how I know I can relate to, on a grand scale, macroeconomics, what's going on within the United States, because I was living off of credit. Even now, I'm living off of credit. So at some point, the banks are going to repossess your assets, because they're not going to trust you with credit anymore. And in the same way, we are headed towards a situation in our global economy where people are going to turn away from the dollar, and they're not going to want to trade, and their goods and services and their exports are going to cost us even more. And the way that that in the United States in the past, and even now in the present, that we've tried to subvert that, even companies, you think about that now, even manufactured goods, that was why people started sending their manufacturer goods over to China, because they were trying to reduce costs. The employees were costing too much, inflation, the dollar, the value of the dollar was going down. The only way that they could moderate their prices and keep things fun. Think about Walmart. That's the only way Walmart has survived, is by forcing all of their all their prospective wholesalers to a price, fixed prices. They would refuse them a certain amount of profits, and that's because Walmart was the biggest distributor. So they forced people to have to send their products overseas to be made in cheaper ways. That's why you think about product quality. Product quality dipped when we had to send it overseas, because that was the only way that we could curve the inflation and try to keep our economy above board, was by basically slave labor. and that's traded in different many ways, going to like India or Indonesia or the Philippines. We're going to keep trying to pass this manufactured goods thing on to third world countries that can tolerate or would tolerate for that time being to build up their economy. But what happens when their economy grows and they don't want to trade at a deficit to the United States anymore? Well, that's inflation. That's when the price of the dollar or the value of the dollar goes down. And that's when people start losing their jobs because the banks won't continue to allow these companies to operate at a deficit for too long. Well, the government then won't be able to bail them out for too much longer. So you see that we're kind of headed down this cycle of an unlimited credit line being called upon. And people are going to realize that these fiduciary policies and these erratic spending habits of the federal government are literally crashing our economy in the long run. And we, the taxpayers, are going to have to pay the price. We're the ones that have to pay for the gas prices going up. We're the ones that have to pay for the increase in groceries, not them. So we, the people, have to take responsibility, and we have to elect an independent president that is going to actually go in there and make permanent changes to the ability. I know this sounds crazy, but it's almost like you need a president that is going to work himself out of a job. That's what you need. It's like when I was a therapist, I would always start that kind of line with my clients and be like, my job is to work myself out of a job, because that's true. We want a president that doesn't want to be president. Counterintuitive, right? That's what I'm saying. We need somebody like me when I was as a therapist who would start out and say, I don't want to be president. I don't want to be your therapist, because I want you to develop your own coping skills so that you don't need me in the future. And in the same way, we need to elect an official who will work himself out of a job, because it's the job of the president to delegate authority so that we can have the free hand of the economy making decisions, which is you, the person, the people are the free hand of the economy. So we need to have limited powers, more limited powers of the president, so that in the future, when another president elected, there's not going to be these major ups and downs. Even in their debates, there shouldn't be too much of a discussion of the economy. That's what I'm saying. Like, they should be able to just observe the economy and be like, yeah, things are going all right. It's going okay. We want it to be the most dull presidential debate ever. Be like, yeah, things are okay. No major problems. Things are all right. That's what we want. We want to have the most boring debates ever. Because we don't want to have so much fluctuation depending on the president that we elect. So yeah, God put that on my heart, and he showed me that this is what I need to be discussing. Each issue that I come up with, it's been things that I've been thinking about for a long time, observations that I've made as a citizen, as a professional, and now as a vested interest person. The older that I get, the more vested I get in our political system, and the more vested I get in wanting to help people with their thinking on these issues, to offer a more bird's eye view on this. So, like, I love the Philadelphia Eagles. They just won today, right? Yeah, they just beat the Bills. What's an eagle do? An eagle soars above, and he can see things that are going on below. And that's just how my personality is built. I'm an INFJ A-A, which is assertive. INFJ. And we do a great deal of thinking. We're intuitive based, and we do a great deal of thinking. And so I've been thinking about these issues for so long. And finally now, after doing my healing work and giving my life back to God and clearing the house and cleaning my room, literally and figuratively, now it's like I see the wisdom, because I asked God for wisdom, like the wisdom of Solomon. I said, God, you just show me wisdom on what I should be doing and how I should be operating. And that's why he gave me all these ideas for business, nonprofit ones and profit ones, because he wants me to give back and he wants me to put in place things that are going to help people, heal people, and um, give people jobs, meaningful income, right? We need jobs here in the United States. We need manufacturers here in the United States. We can't be sending these jobs out to different countries who are communistic, because all we're doing was we're propping up their economy, and then they use that against us potentially. Why are we doing that? It doesn't make any sense. You know, I love what Elon Musk is doing, and the fact that, yes, we as a nation have to embrace this idea that AI is coming along, robotics are coming along, and we need to govern that. Yes, we need to have a worldwide uh discussion on AI, like now, before it's too late, because AI, the power of AI is already exponentially growing, and we can use that for the good for our economy. But we have to have a worldwide agreement on what to use AI for and what not to use it for, because you can change the nature of AI depending on what inputs you put in it. If you're a fascist person like Hitler and you want to use AI to rid yourself of do a genocide, then you can use AI in that way to kill off people. You can. AI can control drones. And I'm not using that just as a fear tactic. I'm just saying, like, we need to have a forward-thinking president, somebody who can foresee the issues going on. Because 3 years ago, when God was showing me all these things about there was going to be a tribulation coming up and that we're going to go through a major thing, and then COVID happened and all these prophecies that he gave me came true, I was like, oh my gosh. And he showed me these same issues that are going to happen with technology, AI, way before it became an issue, way before even Elon Musk was talking about it. I just didn't have the confidence to know to speak up about these issues until now. But I feel like God has given me insight into these things. And so I'm doing I'm just being a faithful servant with the wisdom that he's given me about these issues. Going back to working myself out of a job, one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life was being a counselor and watching the growth of people learn to, and I get a little emotional about it because it's amazing when you empower people to heal themselves, when you teach them how to heal themselves. There is nothing better than watching somebody walk out of your office after a couple months of working with them and seeing the transformation that they go through. That's what kept me in the industry as long as it did before the medical model broke me and the insurance model broke me, forcing me to have to work 2 different jobs to try to make ends meet, because it just wasn't a stable enough income. Insurance only pays you a fraction of what you're really worth. You can't put a dollar amount on life change. You can't. It's invaluable. When you're investing your life and pouring into the life of another person, there's no dollar amount you can put on that. Personal freedom, when you teach somebody and they become free, there is no dollar amount you can put on that. And so, I got a letter from a girl. I remember she wrote it to me. It was our last session and she wrote it to me, and she was this teenage girl who was struggling in high school. She was thinking about going to colleges and she had a lot of stress and anxiety and she was just really struggling in life. And she wrote me this letter and it profoundly impacted me. I didn't have very many people that thanked me for what I did for them and the sacrifice that I did in my own personal life and professional life to be their therapist. But I got this letter and it was just so rewarding to hear the youth of our nation being grateful and growing and changing and being a better person at such a young age. It profoundly impacted me. And in the same way, I see that should be the same role of a president, not to take credit for that job that they should be doing, but humbling themselves and praying and being in tune with God and making judgments that are accurate, and then helping, empowering the people to provide for themselves. Our job as a president is not to take more power and more money from you and promise you the world. That sounds like the mark of the beast to me. That sounds like the Antichrist, the spirit of the Antichrist to me, which is to force everybody to bow to a power that's greater than them. That's, to me, that's demonic. Giving too much power to a government that care less about you as a person, only wants your vote and only wants your money. But it's going to take sacrifice, y'all. It's going to take sacrifice, because in order for somebody to work themselves out of his job as a president, that means that they're going to have to empower the people to make decisions for themselves. And that means less government resources for them, less grants, less government programs, less government jobs, reduced military, and then I'll talk about that in in a future episode. But God gave me even insight on what we should be doing with our military and reducing the size of our federal spending on military and increasing trained militia. And I'm previewing it, but I'll talk about that in another episode upcoming. To talk about this idea is essentially what we were when we were a young nation, which is militia, trained militia. We already have it, and it's called the National Guard. But I think we need to go to a more reservist National Guard approach to military as a nation. And I think if instead of just offering people free college, which is ridiculous because there's no such thing as a free college. I remember, no such thing as a free lunch. But if we offered a significant discount to colleges, and ask that colleges follow through with a discount for guards and reservists on their tuition, and trade that for military service for 2 to 4 years, offering that any citizen of that state, each state could do this with their own state budget and their own state government and their own state treasury, to have a larger National Guard. But then as a federal government, then we would in turn reduce the size of our federal army, our active duty. And of course, there has to be a sacrifice somewhere. Nobody really liked it when Bill Clinton did the sequester and all these military bases got closed down. But you know what? At some point, you have to make ends meet. You have to balance the budget. If you don't, we'll never really truly be free of all of these rises and falls and the inflations and wars and all these things. It takes sacrifice and accountability. That's what it takes. Just like in any family, you need two people essentially now in the economy working and making income somehow. That's just how it is. It used to be that you could have the sole breadwinner, and it was like we had a huge blue collar class of people in our nation. And generally speaking, it was the guy that was going out to make the money, and the wives were at home as the housewives. But that doesn't work anymore in our current economy, because it puts so much pressure on the man, at least I'm speaking for myself, to try to earn so much of an income that we can't do it. So you have two working parents, and it puts the kids in jeopardy. we have to be able to normalize that curve and realize that we're in a digital economy now, and that there is going to be, as there already has been, a major shift of people being in offices to working from home. And I think what that ultimately does is it allows our gender roles to be more normalized again, where we can have even a female and a mother doing work from home and in a home office. And instead of having to be in this place where she has to go into a work environment, it reduces that risk and she's allowed to be at home. And in the same way, we need to embrace this. We need to embrace this shift of the office life. what show is that with The Office? Is it called The Office? It's funny, but that's what we're going away from. We're going away from where everybody has to drive into an office job, and we're going more towards freedom. And we need to embrace that as a country. We need to embrace our freedoms, and diversify our income sources so that, and reduce our spending, right? And in that way, that individual citizen can increase their own freedom. What is finances? It's a source of freedom. If you have an X number of money in your savings account and you have an abundance of wealth, you can invest that money so that it grows on its own and makes you more rich, so that you can then use the dividends from that. If you want to increase your wealth, you can use the dividends for that, or you can go on your vacation if you want to go on your vacation. So, it's not that complicated. It's not that complicated. We make it look and sound a lot more complicated than it really is. Before we sit here and we listen to hours and hours and hours of all these debates and presidential candidates promising us the world on the economy and what they're going to do and their radical ideas that are just going to make America great again, how about this? How about no? How about we already know the answer? And the answer is more freedom, less taxation, smaller government, and bigger citizen financial investments. That's ultimately what it is. And people have to be forced into learning to provide for themselves. You get a government, you elect a president because he's promising you a phone, or he's promising you a handout. Do you know what he's promising you? Indentured servitude, slavery. That's what he's promising you, because on the back end, that's what's going to happen. Why do you think that these borders are being left open? So that all these migrant workers are coming in, and whose jobs are they taking? They're taking the jobs that in our country, most of these folks don't want to work anymore. They don't want to have to go out and work in the fields. People nowadays don't want to have to go and pick apples off a tree. They don't want to have to clean houses and raise kids. We've gotten so spoiled because of our freedoms that we're not willing to work for them anymore. So we're doing a migrant slave labor. We're bringing it, and I watched it firsthand. My neighbor brought in these ridiculous contractors when I was living in this row house. She couldn't afford to pay a real contractor with quality workers. So what did she do? She hired the that's how it is. She got the lowest cost contractor that she could find. And who did he hire for workers? Immigrants. And listen, I love Mexican. I ain't got no problems with Mexicans. None. I got no problem with them. I grew up in San Antonio. I grew up with them as neighbors. I was the minority in my neighborhood, in a Section 8 neighborhood. So I lived with them. And for the most part, they're great people, family oriented, traditional. They would send money back home to their family in Mexico. So I don't have much of a problem with them as an individual or as a society. I don't have a problem with it. But I do have a problem with the fact that we are opening the door for shortcuts in our economy. We have to be willing to face the consequences for our choices. And sometimes that's going to mean closing of military bases. Sometimes that's going to mean a significant reduction of government spending. Should we be spending $9 trillion a year? No. Should we be printing money at the behest of a president who wants to get more votes? No. We need to enact laws that absolutely restrict the oversight of policy, of decision making when it comes to the economy. We need to have a stable economy over the long run. So we need it to be the most boring economy we've ever seen, because it's just going to grow steadily. And again, I keep repeating myself, because what does it say? It says dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. It reminds me of the parable of the talents. You know, five talents was given to one person, 3 to another, and 1 to another. And this is how we need to operate within. We are all given our own genius. We all have it. We don't have to worry about IQ tests. You don't need to worry about how smart you are as compared to other people. Each one of us has our own genius. Our job is to figure out what that genius is and to monetize that. We all have our own individual talents and abilities, and our job is to monetize that. It's to grow that skill, grow that ability, and to monetize that. That's why the Lord wanted me to do this podcast, to, instead of hoarding all of my ideas and hoarding all of these creative ways that the Lord has given me to impact other people for positive and help in a more neutral way think about these issues that are going on in the society. My job is what he wanted me to do, is to be that eagle, to look at things from a higher perspective, observe what's going on, and then make recommendations as a result. And who knows where that'll lead me. I don't know. You never know. But I do know that what God has promised me is that he is going to make, this is what he's told me, that he is going to put me as a seat in front of my enemies. And that just means that he's going to put me in places of influence so that other people can hear a more objective, more moderate view on this. When I think about myself as far as my political alignment, I like to think of being dead center. That's where I am the most comfortable, because I do know and I do see how having some social welfare services, as I've already talked about in a previous episode, which you can look at on the podcast list that I have, when I talked about my experience of what I think we should be doing to combat homelessness and drug addictions and family issues, that there are programs that are federally funded that work. And I talked about the clinical home, the CSBBH program. I talked about that at length, about how there are agencies out there that, like Blair Family Solutions, that are doing an amazing job of helping women, children, families, husbands, fathers, everybody getting through a lot of their mental issues through a federal government funded program. It's not overseen by the government. They hire somebody else to do it. But I'm saying there are instances where it works. So we need to review those programs, the ones that are doing well, audit it, make sure that the money is being allocated and spent, and that the juice is worth the squeeze. And that's what we need. We need a major government audit, and we need an objective outside person that can look at these systems That's how I perceive things. I've always had a knack for being able to look at all systems and figure out what's not working within that system. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's personality and it's a combination of nature and nurture. Right. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family with two alcoholics and an abusive alcoholic mother. I had to learn how to navigate that system. And it was weird. It was almost like I kind of figured out how to live within a toxic situation. It's interesting because I'm a citizen of a country where there's a lot of broken systems within it, a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of laws that don't actually work. Laws were not made, or men were not made for laws. Laws were made for men. And it's the same way for government. We were not made for government. Government was made for us. And we have to reinstitute our power over that by electing the right people in place that are going to work themselves out of a job. And whatever position that the Lord wants me to take, I just pray that it will be to return power to the people. That's the job that the Lord has put in my heart, is to return power to the person that is the one out there working in those dead end jobs to try to provide for their family. Because at the end of it all, I am that person. I am you, just trying to make ends meet, wanting to live a good life. I'm not an elite politician that has an infinite source of control or power or income. And I'm just a voice in the wilderness crying out, saying, there's something wrong here, but I think there's a couple ideas that may help us. And in my opinion, I want to return to "In God We Trust." It's that simple. I want to trust in God and lean not on my own understanding, but in all my ways acknowledge him, and he will lead my path straight. It says, follow me as I follow Christ. And we need to elect politicians that are God-fearing Christians who actually have a grounded belief system and not, or bought and paid for by interest groups. We just can't, we can't elect officials that are bought and paid by interest groups anymore, y'all. We just can't. It's killing our economy. It's destroying our trust in the government. It's destroying our trust in each other. Everybody's pointing fingers and blaming each other right now for everything. Black Lives Matters and left against the right and females against males, and there's no such thing as gender anymore, and all this bullshit. The enemy is winning. This is exactly what he wanted. He wants to tear down the United States. He doesn't want the United States to exist as is anymore, because we are a symbolic representation of freedom. It's interesting because I was reading about Albert Einstein. If you look back in 1922 and you read some of what Albert Einstein was talking about when he was writing an article or a letter about what his experience was like in the United States, he said, I like Americans. They're kind, they're understanding, they have no limitation on, or they have freedom to speak and to, and he was just like, he was dumbfounded by how wonderful these American citizens were kind to him. Now, again, he was Jewish, he was a German Jewish guy. So Jews were really not liked at that point in time. And they still aren't even until today. But his experience coming over to the United States was a positive one. Can you say that now? Can you say that coming into the United States is a welcoming predisposition for people now? For legal immigrants coming in? Or are we just making, are we proselytizing immigrants to take up the mantle of get rich quick and fame and fortune over faith and family? God gives me the recipes. I just pray. And if you want to get cooking, that's what you got to do. You want to get cooking, start praying. And that's what I've been doing each and every day and in every way. I thank him and I thank you. I know that at some point, people are going to start watching these videos. And when they start catching wind of these ideas that I'm bringing up, more and more people are going to join this cause, and they're going to click the like button. They're going to subscribe, and they're going to start commenting on these videos about their life experiences. And if this is you, if you're one of many that are like me, that are tired of what's going on in the political arena, then do your part. Comment. What's your issue? What's your perspective? What's your opinion? If you can understand where I'm coming from, hit the like button. If you want to stick around for future episodes, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that when I post another video, you get notified for it. Each and every single one of these episodes are grounded in faith. So if you're a believer, if you're a person of faith, doesn't matter if you're a Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're Catholic, if you're Christian, even if you're Christian, you're still Catholic. Even if you're Catholic, you're still Christian, because in ways we share many things with each other. However, if you're a person of faith and you have a belief that you can make change for the positive, you can do that by just hitting the like button. You can do that just by subscribing. If you're not that person, if you were not called to become an agent of change in the government, fine. Maybe that's not your calling, but you can help support somebody like me who I believe God has called me to make some type of impact in the political arena. Whatever degree that is, that's up to God. I leave that up to him. God makes men who they are. But I know that he's created me for a reason. He allowed me to suffer 40 years in a broken system that broke me and left me wanting to kill myself. I'm only here by God's grace. I'm literally only alive because of God's grace. Because at my worst, I was ready to kill myself. And by God's grace, I survived. And I gave my life to God, and he gave me a purpose. He reminded me of my purpose by showing me all of my life issues, all of my pains, all of my sufferings, and all of my desires and longings. And because he is a good God, he says that if my people but humble themselves and pray, turn from their wicked ways, I'll forgive them and heal their land. And that's what I did. I asked for forgiveness. He forgave me. He gave me a purpose, and now I'm living it. And you don't have to be me in order for you to understand or agree where I'm coming from when it comes to policies in the government. Because what does it say? It says you'll know them by their fruit. And it's okay to listen to somebody's idea and judge the idea, not the person. That's having discourse. That's having discussion and debate, is tolerance for hearing somebody's perspective without judging them. And that's the difference between somebody like Trump and me, because Trump will attack the person if the idea doesn't resonate with his. And look, I've already talked at great length in my episode talking about presidential candidates. I think Trump is probably going to be elected. That's just my own opinion. I think he's probably going to be reelected. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with every single thing about a person or a political candidate. So, in God we trust. It's on the dollar bill. The question is, how are we as a nation going to enforce and reinforce sound economic policies that will smooth the curve of all of these crazy things going on with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a symptom of corruption. That's all it is. The policies that are being used, the money that's being spent, money is inherently neutral. It's what you do with it that matters. And again, if we want to make a difference, then we have to make policy changes that permanently reduce the ability for politicians to influence the nature of spending. If you have an economy that is growing and there's an abundance of money, sure, then as a people, we can vote for what we want to use that money for. And we vote, or we do that by voting a president who is going to use that surplus for the right, just reasons, but not to get us into proxy wars, not to send our youth to these ridiculous wars that make absolutely no sense. We're spending all of our money and our resources to enrich the pockets of all of these military industrial complexes, these prison industrial complexes now, the prison complex, the industrial complex of prisons. We're enlarging the numbers of dead soldiers, impacted lives, the number of prisoners, while at the same time, we have this amazing opportunity in front of us. If people would just see that it's there, because that's what happens when you have all of these growing pains or these groaning pains, these birthing pains of all of these issues going on in the economy. It makes people ripe for wanting real change. So we're at a great time in our lives right now. We truly are. I know I make it sound like there's a lot of problems. I'm just being honest about what's going on. But we're also in a great time in our lives, because if we do elect the right people and get the right policies in place, boy, we can really make a difference in the direction of our country. We really can. It's not too late. It's not too late. Things aren't so broken that they're unfixable. But we have to make a difference one person at a time. And you can do that by joining me, and I will see you in the next episode.